Why your brain believes repeated lies. There's a strange and slightly uncomfortable truth about the human mind. It doesn't always care whether something is true. What it cares about is whether something feels true. And one of the fastest ways to make something feel true is simple repetition. You hear a statement once and your brain questions it. You hear it twice and your brain starts to recognize it. You hear it 10 times and suddenly it feels familiar. That feeling of familiarity quietly transforms into belief, not because you analyze the information, not because you verified it, but because your brain has seen it enough times to stop resisting it. This is not a flaw in intelligence. It is a built-in cognitive shortcut known as the illusory truth effect. The brain is constantly trying to conserve energy. Every decision, every judgment, every evaluation requires effort. So instead of analyzing everything deeply, the brain uses mental shortcuts. One of those shortcuts is fluency. If something is easy to process, it feels more true, and repetition makes information easier to process. Think about it in a simple way. The first time you hear a claim, your brain has to work harder. It compares it with existing knowledge, checks for inconsistencies, and tries to evaluate it. That takes effort. But the fifth or sixth time, your brain recognizes the pattern instantly. There is no resistance, no friction, just familiarity. And familiarity feels safe. This is why repeated lies can quietly become accepted truths. Consider how this plays out in real life. Advertising is built on this principle. A brand name repeated again and again becomes trustworthy, even if you have never used the product. Political messaging works the same way. A statement repeated across speeches, news clips, and social media starts to feel credible, regardless of its accuracy. Even rumors follow this pattern. At first, you doubt them, but when multiple people repeat the same story, your brain starts to relax its skepticism. It assumes that if so many people are saying it, there must be some truth behind it. What's actually happening is not validation, it's cognitive ease. The brain mistakes ease of processing for accuracy. There is another layer to this. Repetition doesn't just make something familiar, it also reduces your emotional resistance. The first time you hear something shocking or controversial, your brain reacts strongly. But repeated exposure dulls that reaction. Over time, the statement no longer feels alarming. It starts to feel normal. And what feels normal rarely gets questioned. This is why misinformation spreads so effectively in the digital world. Social media platforms are designed to repeat content. You see the same idea in posts, comments, reels, and videos. Even if you don't fully agree with it, your brain is being trained to accept its presence. Eventually, it stops feeling like a lie. It just feels like another opinion. Then it feels like a possibility. Then, without you noticing, it becomes a belief. What makes this even more powerful is that intelligence does not fully protect you. Studies show that even when people know a statement is false, repeated exposure still increases the likelihood that they will rate it as true later. Awareness helps, but it does not completely override the brain's tendency toward familiarity. That's what makes this effect so subtle. You don't feel like you're being influenced. There's no moment where you suddenly decide to believe a lie. It happens gradually, quietly, almost invisibly. So, what can you do about it? The first step is awareness. Once you understand that repetition creates perceived truth, you start noticing patterns. When you hear something repeated often, instead of trusting it more, you pause. You ask a simple question. Have I verified this, or have I just heard it many times? The second step is slowing down your thinking. The brain defaults to fast, effortless processing, but critical thinking requires deliberate effort. When something feels obviously true, that's often the moment to question it more carefully. The third step is diversifying your information sources. If you only consume information from one place, repetition becomes stronger and more persuasive. Exposure to multiple perspectives breaks that cycle and forces your brain to evaluate rather than accept. At its core, this phenomenon reveals something important about human psychology. Belief is not always built on evidence. It is often built on exposure. The more you see something, the more your brain trusts it, not because it deserves trust, but because it feels familiar. And that feeling is powerful enough to turn repetition into reality.